Thank you, Carlos. And I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight on Zoom. Our state is facing something very dire, as are last count like 22 other states. I'm going to review what's going on a little bit, just kind of topically. I'll leave the specifics, the legal specifics to our friend from the New Mexico Center for Law and Poverty. But at the beginning of the pandemic, a decision was made to increase SNAP allotments. Now, for those that don't know, SNAP is the same thing as food stamps, also known as EBT. So if people were on that program, they qualified for the program, household size versus income, and then living expenses and other things are taken into consideration to determine how much each household gets. So a decision was made to use maximum allotments. States could apply for a waiver to maximize the allotments that people on SNAP would be getting. And this was, in my humble opinion, having worked at a food bank for 14 years, this was a very good move. And there are studies that show just how much this helped the US economy, the state economy, and not even going into the households that decision helped. These allotments were tied to the public health orders, which are not set to expire until May. But the passing of the omnibus in Congress changed all that. And now, less than a month and a half notice, those allotments are going down. I'm going to quickly share my screen, and I'll kind of explain this a little bit more, and then we'll have some really great speakers tonight. If someone could just give me a head nod if you're seeing the screen. Okay. All right. So just looking at the places in yellow, again, SNAP, it's about the household size versus income. So we're going to focus on a household of one. That's sort of the easiest example. It's also the most dramatic example. But a household of one prior to the emergency allotments at this time would qualify for $23. The maximum allotment for a household of one is 281. So if someone was getting the minimum allotment, that would be maximized to 281 a month. And you can see the other maximum allotments for other households. But just looking at this maximized allotment for a household of one, and household of one could be it could be a person, working part-time or full-time that barely qualifies for SNAP. It could be a lot of our senior population living off of Social Security checks. So keep that in mind. I'm just going to point out a couple of things, and I'm going to go pretty fast. If anybody needs a better explanation, I'd be happy to address that. I'll put my email in the chat. So this is I've taken this from the Feeding America SNAP Impact Calculator. This calculator is a very ingenious tool that we use to turn completed SNAP applications into meals. $281 a month over the course of 15 months. 15 months is the average certification period that people are on SNAP. And then also I'll take into account the average retail meal, which is $3.02. Now, let's not dwell too much on really how profoundly little amount of food you can get for $3.02, but that is the average retail meal. So that amount of SNAP allotment turns into about 875 meals for a household of one over the course of 15 months. And that's with these maximized allotments, what they are now calling is extra SNAP or emergency SNAP allotments. All right, now let's take a look. Now that those allotments have gone from $281 to $23 over 15 months, that comes out to 72 meals. So just taking a look at this. So meals with the allotments, with the maximized allotments, 875 for a household of one. Meals after this period, by the way, it ended February 28th. So as of March, they're going to see their grocery budget cut. After March 1, 72. That's a loss of 803 meals. Now, another government nutrition program called TFAP is being increased, but that's really going to only come out to about $28 per participating household. To get TFAP, you've got to go to a food bank, food pantry, which may or may not be open when you can get there. Transportation could be an issue. It's definitely a great program. And as a food bank, we're reliant on this program to get the food to people, but it doesn't reach everyone that needs it, unfortunately. So this household of one who just saw their loss of 803 months over 15 months, they're going to have to come up with $2,425.06 to make up that difference. So again, let's look at a senior citizen on Social Security. Maybe they're getting $600, $800 a month. How are they going to make up for $2,425 extra over a 15-month period? And just to kind of paint a picture of it, this is going to affect 23% of New Mexico. 23% of our population relies on SNAP, and every household on SNAP is going to see a cut. Again, this household of one is the most dramatic cut, but we're already getting calls on our food assistance line from people in this very, very position that are seeing this enormous drop. Last I checked, the state is trying to do things, particularly for seniors, to ease the blow, but it's still going to be a blow, and it is already happening. And I certainly, don't mean to sound like a doomsayer, but we've been watching this and waiting for this to happen since the allotments were raised. Something similar was done during the recession. SNAP allotments were raised 15%. And the funny thing is, in both cases, during the recession, during the pandemic, there wasn't a huge political fuss or fight about it in Congress. It was pretty bipartisan. But then once the crisis is thought to be over, SNAP benefits in both cases have gone down, and it will have a just tremendous impact. I'll just add this real quickly. Even if someone is just not a fan of any kind of government nutrition programs and doesn't believe it's a good thing, nonetheless, 23% of New Mexicans rely on it. That's a significant food source to New Mexico. And it will also have an economic impact on local businesses, grocery stores, places where people buy the food. So now that I've kind of set up the dreariness, we'll go ahead and go to our first presenter. And please keep some questions in mind. We've got some time for Q&A. So we're going to go to my pal, Verenice, from the Center for Law and Poverty. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Verenice Peregrino-Pompa. I'm an attorney at the New Mexico Center on Law and Poverty. We're a nonprofit that works to advance economic and social justice through education, advocacy, litigation, and also some legislative work. So we've been pushing some bills at the legislature this legislative session. And I work on the public benefits team, which does SNAP. Well, I work on SNAP, Medicaid, and childcare assistance. So of course, everyone in New Mexico should have enough money for food, and no one should go hungry. But as you all probably know, 1 in 4 New Mexicans participate in SNAP. And during the COVID-19 public health emergency, the federal government, like Jason said, was able to provide these emergency allotments, and also they were able to renew people's public benefits automatically. So they weren't having to process all of these cases. People were just automatically renewed. And now these emergency allotments are coming to an end. They're coming to an end now in March. So they were, the last month that people were getting them were in February, even though the public health emergency actually ends in May. So it was thought that it would be once the public health emergency ends, but it actually is going to be sooner. And like Jason had said, he showed those tables of like what a maximum allotment would be. And for a family of 3, for example, the maximum allotment would be $740. And now it's going to go down. So families are going to receive the average amount. So a family of 3 is now going to receive approximately $335 per month. And those emergency allotments were possible through this federal funding for the public health emergency. So unfortunately, we're no longer going to see those emergency allotments. So when those emergency allotments were being given out, SNAP participants got over $1 billion in additional benefits. And that was to 725,000 SNAP recipients. So they got about $1 billion in extra SNAP. And what also happened was that some students, some college students were able to qualify for SNAP. And they were students that, let's see. They were students that either had federal work-study programs or students that weren't expected to receive family contribution for their education. So unfortunately, those students aren't going to get those SNAP benefits anymore. So what we expect is that now that these participants in SNAP aren't being automatically renewed, we expect that there's going to be a big backlog in processing of these cases. And we know that they've been behind even when they were renewing people automatically. So now that all of these people are going to have to process at the same time, we anticipate that there's going to be a big backlog. People are going to have their benefits delayed. So we really want to let people know of like what they need to do now that they have to renew their benefits. So one of the main things that we should let people know is that if their family situation is changed, that they need to let the Human Services Department know, or the Income Support Division. So if someone has moved into their house or if their income has changed, they really need to let them know, because that might affect their eligibility. Other things that they have said that HSD has put out in their messaging is that everyone needs to make sure that their contact information is up to date, because they're going to be receiving these notices that they need to renew in the mail. People need to look out for these turquoise envelopes that are going to say it's time to renew. And, you know, the hope is that people will like pay more attention because it's turquoise envelope versus the white envelopes. So making sure that your income's up to date, your address is up to date. People can renew on the yes.state.nm.us website. They can renew their applications, their SNAP applications by mail, by fax. They can also call, but the thing is that there's probably going to be a long wait time. So they can call the ISD number, which is 1-800-283-4465. We do have a fact sheet that we want to share out, and I think I need to update a couple things on it. So maybe Jason, if I could maybe update it and then we can send it out. So because people participate normally in both SNAP and Medicaid, we do want to give some information specific to Medicaid. So some people are going to be told that they no longer qualify for Medicaid. But fortunately, there are going to be really affordable, like either low income or low cost or no cost plans through the exchange. So it's going to be private insurance, but we have gotten some funding through the Healthcare Affordability Fund that recently passed that you might have heard of, that is really helping cover some of those costs. So people can go to bewellnm.com or call the 1-800 number 1-833-862-3935. And I can put those numbers in the chat as other people are presenting. But really, people should take advantage of that, because some plans will be, like I said, no cost. And then some of the info that I've given today about what you do if you need to renew is available through the HSD website. And I'll put it in the chat, but it's renew.hsd.nm.gov. And we also want to let everybody know that if they need help, if their benefits are delayed, that the Center on Poverty is happy to help. We also know that New Mexico Legal Aid, and I saw Juan Martinez on, they're also helping some people if they're having issues with their public benefits. And then of course, our friends at Roadrunner Food Bank are connecting people with food. But yeah, I will put some of that info in the chat, and I'm happy to answer any questions whenever that time comes. But thank you so much for letting me present today.
All right, thank you so much, Verenice, for pointing that out. Yeah, and we'll have those flyers available from the Center for Law and Poverty. And she brings up just some excellent points of what's going on behind the scenes. All right, our next presenter is Elizabeth Weaver from Feeding America. She's Feeding America, by the way, I should explain, is the nationwide network of food banks. So Roadrunner Food Bank is the member food bank for New Mexico. Feeding America, I wouldn't be here right now, probably tonight, if Feeding America hadn't secured funding for food banks to start SNAP outreach programs and connect people with public benefits. So without further ado, Elizabeth, go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Jason. And it's an honor and a privilege to be with you all this evening. As Jason mentioned, my name is Elizabeth Weaver, and I'm a specialist on the Public Benefits Access team at Feeding America. And as the name kind of denotes, the team that I'm on works primarily with SNAP application assistance. Feeding America has the largest network of SNAP application assisters outside of Department of Health and Human Services or the individual states. And so we work with food bank members like Jason, knowing that as participants, as neighbors come in to get food, there's a wealth of other resources that food banks can help provide. So the great thing about being, I guess, the third panelist on call is that all of the presenters that have gone before me have taken a lot of my really great notes. So this might sound a little bit like a broken record, but hopefully it can clarify a few things. And maybe if you're like me, though, hearing things more than once is not always a bad thing. So Jason kind of explained it beautifully that at the beginning of the pandemic, with so many folks out of work. And it was, in some ways I can barely remember 2020, but in other ways it is so vivid in my mind. And I feel like that's a very interesting place to be. But when we were all in lockdown and not able to go to the grocery store, and many people weren't able to work or were laid off, the government, as Jason said, decided to infuse SNAP, knowing that folks were not going to be able to make ends meet and needed that extra boost for groceries. Also, as that was the start of the kind of product line delays that we've all come to know and love. So there was a lot of food shortages and things were getting more expensive. So SNAP decided everyone got the maximum allotment. And at that time, I think that equated to about $90 to $92 extra. So if you were not getting the maximum allotment, and how you get a maximum allotment is SNAP is based off of several different factors, like Jason kind of mentioned. They look at your household size, they look at expenses. So like sometimes rent is higher than if you have a mortgage. And so those affect, so a household of 3 could have many different amounts that they get per month. But during the pandemic, everyone based on their household size got their maximum allotment for that household size. Folks that were already getting the maximum allotment after like a month or two were like, well, for the number of families that are getting the maximum allotment, their lives have not gotten any easier. Groceries are still expensive, but they haven't gotten any extra cash. They were bumped up and they got like, I think it was 90 or 92 extra dollars a month, just to make it more equitable. So those have been going on, and the government said for the duration of the public health emergency, states can opt in to do that. We'll fast forward to 2021. And as you know, kind of after administrative changes in states and then in the White House, different, and once kind of the vaccine started rolling out, or we rounded out to the second batch of COVID, states started opting in and out of having their own public health emergency. So the allotments were able to be held in place if your state also had a public health emergency in place. And I'm going to share my screen briefly because this might help you if you're a visible person like me. This is from the USDA, and this is kind of a linear timeline, and it shows you a little bit what started happening. So for New Mexico, as it was mentioned before, the maximum allotments, the last month that any neighbor or recipient of SNAP will see those on their EBT cards was last month. This is March 6th, and SNAP dollars start getting allotted to cards between the 1st and the 6th. It's on a rolling basis based on a bunch of stuff that I don't want to bore you with, but essentially case numbers. So today, this is the first month, this is actually within the first week that folks are going to see that difference in their EBT cards. However, some states have started rolling back those emergency allotments months ago. I live and work remotely in Montana. And so if you'll look at this timeline, like we were one of the first to the party of letting go of our emergency allotments back in July of 2021. So when our governor decided to end the public health emergency as it was listed for Montana, those emergency allotments went away. I can tell you without trying to be too grim that when those emergency allotments go away, it is hard. It's hard for a lot of folks, especially now. I am still astounded every time I go to the grocery store at the cost of groceries. I was just there on Saturday and you go to pick up a package of meat or a gallon of milk, and I'm still like, I can't believe it's this price. Eggs sometimes in our grocery stores are getting can be upwards of $4. And that's just, astounding to me. And so I know, especially with these allotments going away, food has not gone down. And we are really seeing that. And I feel the pinch about groceries. So I can only imagine for our neighbors that are really facing food insecurity, how that's going to be, knowing that their amounts are going down. The average amount that I think it's decreasing, again, there are some differences, is about $82 a person. And that's because during the course of the pandemic, SNAP does every year on October 1st, the first day of the federal fiscal year, they do take a COLA adjustment. So every year SNAP benefits do adjust based on cost of living. There are a few other things to the program. So the minimum amounts, increase ever so slightly, and the maximum amounts increase ever so slightly. But as we know this year, those are not keeping up nearly at all or close to the cost of inflation. So it's going to drop, the average amount is going to drop about $82 a person. But for seniors and households of one, as Jason mentioned earlier, that's such a stark difference, especially seniors, because they often have lower deductions such as housing costs. Many of them own their own home, so they're not able to have as much taken out for housing costs. So many seniors receive the minimum benefit to start with. And so they'll be dropping from about $281 to $23 a month. And that is a colossal loss of cash. I'm going to share another, and this PDF, by the way, I will send to Jason, and he can make sure you all have it circulated. And then also this fact sheet that was put together by our friends at FRAC, which is the Food Research Action Center, and it's for New Mexico. So it can show that the number, and it's 259,467 households will be affected by the SNAP cuts that happened. The new average cost is $6 of a SNAP benefit. So it's $6 per person per day is the new average amount that New Mexicans will have. To me, the big thing too, aside from the dismal amount of I can't eat on $6 a day if you're trying to cook and make healthy meals and so forth, but also the loss of revenues, and it's expected to be about $41 million in federal funds per month that are lost from New Mexico as a result of this termination. We knew it was coming, and a little bit of the backstory, it's a little bit of we robbed Peter to pay Paul. In the omnibus, they moved some funds, and they're like, if we end the emergency allotments early, I think it was 32 states still had them in place, that money was moved over and will be funding a permanent summer EBT program, which is also great. But it does create, in the meantime, you're like, we're still feeding folks that are experiencing food insecurity and so forth, but it was done kind of quickly and without a ton of notice. And that, especially at a time when groceries are so expensive, inflation is so high, and we are, bumping our way along economically, it still hurts in the pocket. And so wanted you all to kind of have a little bit of this knowledge and background, knowing that This month, this chatter will probably take place. You will see it in your congregations, in your parishes, in your communities. Folks might be talking about it more. And just to give a backstory of like why those benefit amounts dropped, and knowing that as we have seen in other states across the nation that have ended that, there will be some increased need, just because how do you come up with that extra cash? You know, if you went from $281 a month to 23, how do you come up with that extra, you know, to what is that, $250-ish a month to buy groceries if you're on a fixed income? So I think that that's all without being super redundant to anything else, but just to give you kind of a little bit of backstory, and I will drop a link in the chat. On our website, Feeding America's website, we do have a public facing page. And again, I will make sure that Jason gets these links and the PDFs to share out with you. But we do have a kind of like a fact Q&A that's forward facing for neighbors. So folks have questions. We do have some resources on our website that kind of explains this a little bit. And I think with that, Jason, I will turn it back to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And yeah, please send me those flyers, and I'll Carlos and I will get them out to everyone. I especially need the FRAC New Mexico flyer. That would be something good for me to have, and I appreciate that. Let's see here. So yeah, so there's two outlooks on this. I'm feeling a need to point to something positive here, but there's not a lot. This is it is just going to be really rough for a lot of folks. So in the absence of that, let's go ahead and look at some reflections. So Carlos, let me go ahead and turn that over to you to introduce everyone, and then after that we'll do some Q&A. So Verenice and Elizabeth, if you could hang for a while, and we might have some questions for you after this.
Tonight, because of Purim, we originally were gonna have a reflection from folks from Mazon. Jewish response to hunger. Mazon has been very much at the forefront of promoting and protecting SNAP among one of their campaigns, but they were unable to do that. And so instead of that, we came up with reflections from faith leaders. Most of these reflections were made during the debate on the Farm Bill reauthorization in 2013 and 2018. So it might that's the context in which these reflections came. I'm going to start with two reflections from the Jewish tradition, and then Amna Nair is going to do a reflection from the Muslim tradition. Jeannie Elmhorst is going to do one from the Buddhist tradition. Joy Dinaro is going to do one from the Catholic bishops, and Judy Messel is going to do from three Protestant denominations. So I'm going to start here. This comment is from Rabbi Ariana Silverman of the Isaac Agree Downtown Synagogue in Detroit. I give my strong support to SNAP because I believe my faith commands me to do so. God commands 36 times to love strangers and support the needy in the first 5 books of the Bible. And this one comes from Abby Liebman, President and Chief Executive Officer of Mazon. Jewish text and tradition compel us to honor the dignity of every person, especially those who are struggling to feed themselves and their families. We urge Congress to ensure a 2018 Farm Bill that honors its bipartisan history and to cease efforts to undermine SNAP by rejecting proposals that will bring real harm to real people who struggle. Amna?
Yes, hi. Let me pull the page, please. Good evening, everyone. I'm in the car, so okay, so I am going to read. It is from Afif Rahman, Executive Director, Polygon Education Fund. And the reading says, in Islam, we are taught that to save one life is to save all of humanity. And holding food, oh my God, holding food ransom from millions of hungry people threatens millions of trees. Congress needs to shape up fast and draft a farm bill that protects and increases funding for SNAP and does not force Americans to decide between working and staying alive. Thank you.
This reflection is from the Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi from Chongyen Monastery in Carmel, New York. SNAP still serves as a critical safety net that protects the vulnerable from an even deeper plunge into the pit of food insecurity, a situation in which they might have to skip meals, reduce their nutritional intake, or go for days without eating. The program has been found to be particularly effective in improving the health and learning abilities of children who find it hard to concentrate at school with empty bellies.
Hi, I'm Joy Denaro, and I am reading from Bishop Stephen E. Blair. He's from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, and it's in a letter to the U.S. House of Representatives. This is a crucial time for our nation to place a circle of protection around programs that build a more just framework and put poor and hungry people first. I respectfully urge you to reject efforts to reduce or restructure SNAP and to pursue instead the common good in agriculture and food policy that works from a genuine preferential option for the poor.
I'm going to read first from the Reverend Dr. Susan Henry Crow, General Secretary, United Methodist Church, General Board of Church and Society. She says, providing food for those suffering from hunger is central to our Christian faith. The United Methodist Church understands this call not simply as a matter of charity, but of responsibility, righteousness, and justice. I will also read from Sandy Sorensen, Director, United Church of Christ, Washington, D.C. office. Following the justice witness of our United Church of Christ General Synod, we are committed to ensuring that our sisters and brothers, neighbors, and children have access to the food they need to pursue a life of dignity and purpose. And finally, from Rebecca Linder Blatchley, Director, Office of Government Relations, the Episcopal Church. Our faith teaches that all children of God should be fed, and we do not believe this should be restricted so that people go hungry. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And now Jason's going to moderate the question and answers.
Well, you know, feeling some despair over this, it is nice to turn to words long written down and turn to the modern day prophets and wise people that might have some insight on how to look at this and what to do. So I really appreciate everybody reading those pieces and giving us that tonight. I do want to go to the question and answer, but I wanted to acknowledge something. You know, we're showing some charts, we're showing some stats, figures. I do want to acknowledge that this thing that we're talking about, this loss to New Mexico, could be affecting people on this call. It could be affecting, it certainly will be affecting family members of people on this call. So, you know, this is something that we're all really thinking about in our hearts. It's not just simple papers or talking points, and I just wanted to say that. But with that in mind, here's an opportunity to talk to Elizabeth and Verenice. I don't believe we have an ability to raise hands digitally, do we? Oh, we do. How about that? All right.
I do have a question.
Go ahead,
This is
Carlos.
for Elizabeth. This question is for Elizabeth. What do you, I mean, it's a little ways away, but what have you heard? What do you see in terms of how the Farm Bill, the reauthorization coming up is going to deal with SNAP? Do you foresee a lot of cuts or proposals to cut the benefits?
Sure. Thank you for that question, Carlos. I think if I had the actual answer to that, I would probably make a lot of money, like a crystal ball to tell me that. There have been some committee hearings on the Hill preliminarily about the Farm Bill and on the ag on the House and Senate on the ag committees, which is where the Farm Bill goes first because it is housed under the USDA. It is, as things are in Washington right now, politically charged. It's hard to say what exact cuts there will be. I think there were some things put in place from the last Farm Bill and things that have come out of the pandemic and also the White House Conference on Hunger, such as reexamining the Thrifty Food Plan, which is the plan that was from the 70s, and we're still using it, which sets the rate of how much benefits. It's looking at food cost, and that is determining how much like a maximum allotment is and what a minimum allotment is. So they use that Thrifty Food Plan to determine benefits. And that hadn't been touched in like 40 some years. So they are now, the good news is that had been in place to like, let's re-examine the Thrifty Food Plan so we can adjust benefits. And that was outside of the Farm Bill. I think the Farm Bill, as most of you are seeing probably in your legislatures, it's going to be in some ways an uphill fight. And there's a couple of other factors right now. So we just don't quite know how much of an uphill fight it will be. It's, again, that to bring up that phrase again, it's a little bit of like you rob Peter to pay Paul. So it depends on what else is happening in that time. We are anticipating it will be challenging, but there has been so many stories and so much need right now that we're hoping to stave off massive cuts, or hopefully that the Farm Bill will stave off some massive cuts.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I think it's safe to say too, the usual drum that'll be banged on one side of the aisle is job requirements, work requirements. Basically a modern version of let's make people work for their food. Not proven to really be successful anywhere. But again, I'm stepping outside my MC duties. Let's move on to the next question. Does anybody, if you don't know how to raise your hand like Carlos did, please feel free just to come off mic. And if too many people talk at once, I'll moderate. That's my job tonight.
Ellen's
Hi.
hands.
Go ahead, Ellen.
I have a very specific question. I'm concerned with the Farm Bill and the benefits to school, especially under Title I programs. How will that affect families? Because there's free lunch right now. And I was very curious about how will that be affected, that whole school lunch program?
I have not heard of them going after school lunch as of yet in the Farm Bill. And so that there's always time, but usually the pecking order tends to be SNAP, and then we work our way down because, I think that kids tend to be, although this is one of those weird things where SNAP affecting families, I think sometimes lawmakers, it's easy to remove like kids as part of those families, but generally kids like WIC programs, school lunches, things like that tend to be a little bit at the bottom of the pecking order because it gets really hard to go back to your constituents and say you were the guy or the woman or whoever that hates the kids, and to be blunt, and we're trying to cut their food. So I haven't heard anything about school lunches yet. That's not to say that they could come up, but they will probably be a little bit of a lower tier.
Thank you.
And it should be said, Elizabeth, she knows what she's talking about. Feeding America has offices in DC and just has a very robust government relations team. I'm always astounded by the information they have. So yeah, just to kind of give you a little background on Elizabeth. Anyone have a question for either one of our panelists? Please feel free to come off mute while you're doing that. I anticipate there might be some awkward silences. So I got a question for Verenice. So we're talking about the Farm Bill. Now SNAP is basically renewed whenever the Farm Bill comes up. So on the heels of this massive cut that's hitting, our state and many others, we have the Farm Bill battle coming up. It's always a battle royale, but focusing on what's happening right now, Verenice, are there is there some local action to take that you can see or suggest?
So right now at the legislature, there are some bills that are specific to SNAP. They're like moving through committees, but unfortunately there aren't any that are specific to, for example, getting state money to replace the federal money that was allowing for these federal or for these emergency allotments. The bills that we've seen are things like increasing benefits for seniors to adjust for increased costs. As we know, things are more expensive for all of us, but specifically, for seniors who sometimes have even lower incomes. So to increase SNAP benefits for seniors, there was one bill that is for extending benefits once people stop qualifying for them. So as we all know, people, when they stop qualifying for SNAP because they make too much money, they often are still not making a lot of money. They're still making a pretty low income. So there's a bill right now that would make it to where people have a 3-month grace period where they would, even when they stop qualifying because they make too much money, they would have 3 months before they are taken off of SNAP. And then there are other programs, like there's a bill that would be for DOH, but there are these fresh produce vouchers, and that would be, I believe, also for seniors. That would be so that they can purchase fresh food. So like I said, they are hopeful bills and programs that are related to SNAP or SNAP adjacent, but they're not in any way going to replace those emergency allotments.
Thank you. Any other questions for our panelists? We have a little bit of extra time.
I'd like to make a comment here.
Please.
Along the lines of those fresh food voucher boxes you're referring to. I think that, are you talking about the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program? And seniors and WIC moms receive funds to be able to go to farmers markets and buy fresh local produce. We also have another program at the New Mexico Farmers Marketing Association called the Double Up Food Bucks program, where and another one called Fresh RX. And these are two wonderful programs at farmers markets that not only help local food producers, but they also bring those federal funds into communities because the local the vendors get the funds from the EBT program, from the SNAP funds, and then the Double Up Food Bucks doubles those funds for fresh produce at farmers markets from these local growers, who then go and spend that money in their local community. And so that those federal funds actually come into communities. And so again, it's a farmers market program called the Double Up Food Bucks program. And if anybody here works with clients or individuals who are receiving SNAP, being able to remind them that if they have a local farmers market, a lot of times they can go and spend those funds with with the local growers in that food system, have social experiences, and there's a lot of benefit in getting those SNAP funds as well as doubling them. So if they've lost a majority of their funds, they can actually go to farmers markets and double those EBT benefits by buying local produce. That's all. I just wanted to insert that there.
No, I'm glad you did. Thank you, Andrea. That's no, it's a very good point. Those are two excellent programs, and yeah, a good way for folks to deal with the loss of allotment that's now happening. Any other questions? I don't see any questions in the chat. You're welcome to put a question in there.
Yeah.
Okay, we got Jean, and then we'll go to Judith. Go ahead, Jean.
Yeah, just a quick question. How do you anticipate, or how is the Roadrunner Food Bank already making attempts to adjust to what has started to happen?
This is a tough one. So this is just such a perfect storm, a totally preventable perfect storm. The models for food banks are changing. We can no longer count on a lot of big, I'm going to get in trouble here. I need to word this very carefully. Elizabeth, I wish you had a mute button for me. You know, we're not getting these giant donations from food manufacturers anymore. We're not getting a lot of overstock coming through. Now that it is perceived the pandemic is coming to an end, some of the programs that we're getting government commodities through our warehouse, the amount we're getting from them is lessening. So food banks around the country, we're having to change the model. We're having to adapt to a new day and age of purchasing more food than we had previously ever been able to do. So it is a bit of a shock. That being said, if I can speak with a little bit of pride, you know, the food banks, we're going to do whatever we can and whatever we need to. During, you know, when the pandemic hit, I mean, the country hadn't seen anything like that in 100 years. And I saw so many of my colleagues here in Albuquerque and around the state and then around the country just adapt to what was happening. And suddenly we're doing distributions that used to be 200 household size distributions up to 800, 1200. Having worked at the food bank for years, I just never seen lines of cars like that. And that was all an example of the food banks adapting. So whatever's coming, we're going to try to do our best to deal with it. But yeah, there's a bad moon rising for sure. Judith, go ahead with your question now that I've cheered everybody up.
Yes, this is also about the Farm Bill and the reauthorization, and specifically the SNAP program in terms of making it possible for tribal governments to administer their own SNAP programs. And I just wondered if that is a priority for other advocates on the Farm Bill, and how people think that might go. And it would certainly, you know, be meaningful in New Mexico because we have several tribal governments. Thank you.
Absolutely. So just a little bit of a context. What Judith was mentioning is tribal nations receive commodities that operate very differently than other commodities, and they call this program, it's a terrible acronym, FDPIR, which literally stands for Food Distribution Program on Indian Reservations. And that is a commodity that tribal nations can receive. But if you are receiving those commodities, but unlike senior commodities or TFAP commodities or any other commodities for other groups, which you can get commodities and SNAP, in FDPIR, you are unable to receive, if you receive tribal commodities, you may not receive SNAP. And I think that feels blatantly racist, because it's the only commodity program that operates like that. And often Indian country is some of the highest need areas. That is something advocates are working on. There is also a native farm bill, which FDPIR gets housed in, and that is something that I have a little bit less experience with, but Feeding America does have some folks that sit on a coalition that follows that, and it's primarily, I think, around ag and culturally appropriate foods, because tribal nations are separate nations. So there's a little bit of stuff that doesn't get folded into the traditional farm bill, but it is something that we it is near and dear to my heart. I would love that to be repealed in the regular farm bill, because I live in Indian country, and I'm telling, you know, so I don't know how. I think it always kind of comes up in conversation, but it's a little too early yet to get a pulse on the likelihood of that. But I do know that it is an issue that every year we do bring up in both the native farm bill and also the standard farm bill.
Thanks, Elizabeth. We have time for one more question if someone has something to ask.
Well, this is not a question. It's just Ellen had talked about the school meals. I think that there's a major initiative going through the New Mexico legislature, sponsored by Senator Michael Padilla, to provide universal school meals, SB4. I think it passed through major committees. I'm not sure if at one point it's going to go to the floor, but we'll have updates for that in our April meeting, and also updates on what was all the requests that were put on hunger through HB2, the budget bill. So I encourage you to join us in April. Just if you're not on our mailing list, please do send your email address and we can actually put you on the mailing list, but we'll have updates on those things.
All right, well, we're coming up at the end here. I really want to thank everybody for tuning in, zooming in, whatever we still call it. You'd think I'd have these down after 3 years of this. But I do want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank our panelists, Elizabeth Weaver from Feeding America and Verenice Peregrino-Pompa from the New Mexico Center for Law and Poverty. I appreciate you both taking your time to join us. I owe you both a libation of sorts when I get the chance. So I'm going to just leave you all with a little thought. Working at the food bank and answering so many of the calls that come into our food assistance line, it's just not rare for me to encounter someone who's calling specifically looking for help, not for themselves, but they want to help their neighbor or a family member. And oftentimes when I've received these calls, people have said, I've tried to buy them groceries, but I can't keep doing that. Or I've tried to help them out, but I have my own household. And really that's just what's so dire about it. We have our family members in need. We have our neighbors in need. And there's only so much we can do for them before it affects, our bottom line. And that is why I think programs like SNAP are so important. They are a way of helping our friends and our neighbors. Some might not even be related to us. Some might not live in our community, but they're still our friends, our family, our neighbors. And SNAP is a way that through a fraction of our tax dollars, we can help other people. So it kills me, that we made it through this pandemic, or I think we're coming through it. It kills me we've come this far in 3 years. Our country was able to face this horrible sickness and boost SNAP allotments nationally. I do not understand for the life of me why that cannot continue. But nonetheless, we got a battle coming up with the Farm Bill. So definitely call your representatives, call your Congress people. In the meantime, our friends, neighbors, and family are going to be suffering. They're going to be hit hard by this. Now is the time to, donate to your local food bank. If you don't want to donate to your food bank, you can call and find out where the food pantries are in your community, your neighborhood, and you can call them and donate directly. I'm sure they would be happy to take any kind of funds. Donate your time and keep everybody in your heart. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, and you all have a very good evening.
Thank you.